can give you
capacity, having in the kind of work you've done, to understand how to coach and counsel people. But I'm a business guy, a career guy, and I've been helping people in the workplace for a while, and I'll give you a few takes on that. And then, as I said, I just want to talk to you a little bit about respect. I know very little about, which is the actual strategies for dealing with this. Many different workplaces. I get the pleasure of working with leaders in all those organizations, and I just want to give you 2 minutes on things you probably already know about the world of work and the context within which the issue of sexual harassment has continued to be an issue that we need to be talking about. The list is very long of kind of the realities of today's work, and I won't walk through all of them. I will tell you that free agency, much like in sports, is now a reality in the workplace, as you know. That means is people basically check in every 2, 3, 5, and 7 years and make a decision whether they'll keep doing what they're doing or not. The beauty of it in sports is you've signed a contract, there's a date, and the boss knows you may be leaving at the end of 2, 3, 5, or 7. Employees don't do that. Employees go home, they talk to their sweetie, they come back, and they tell their boss, having accepted another job, that they're leaving. So the world of work in free agency is a real tough one. This is you. Our teams are multidisciplined. Our project teams are multi-tasked. We have wonderful people bringing different skill sets to the table. And our challenge as leaders and as business people and as managers and, in fact, as coworkers is to find a way to have all of these talented folks work together in a way that makes sense. It's increasingly difficult. You know that we have 4 generations in the workplace. It's represented here for the most part. It's a joy to do that, though it does create some challenges for everybody. What is this? Delta, the universal sign for change. So you know that some of you will remember, you're been around enough to know that we used to go into jobs as leaders and managers and administrators and they say, for God's sakes, don't change a thing. Nancy, keep it the way it is. This was your job as a manager, leader, administrator. And now our reality is all about how do I bring about change? How do I improve upon things? How do I do it differently? What we do tomorrow will look very different from what we do today. And we have choices as employees and as individuals in terms of how we do that. So that reality is with us. For many, change is a joy. For others, not so much. Right? Not so much. But the notion is one that says, as we kind of get used to this shortened cycle of change, things stay the same shorter and shorter in terms of technology and everything else. So we know this to be true. You also know that employers will continue to thirst for talent. That will not change. Those of you who are in the staffing world, and I had the joy of being a headhunter for a number of years, and man, every organization, I'll bet you every one of your organizations has a spot that they struggle to fill. Or that if somebody left, they'd really be in a pickle. So our organizations are going to continue to experience that kind of challenge. We also know that who we let on the bus and who joins our organizations is critical. Who we let off the bus is equally critical. And increasingly, organizations have figured that out. Organizations used to be big enough that it used to be able to hide you. Having trouble with you, you're not doing so well, we'll put you over there where you can't hurt us too much, and you can't hurt anybody else or yourself. Well, now we've pared our organizations down so much that we no longer have that. So what that leads us to is the reality of having a lot of difficult conversations with people. That means that I have resources, human resources, that I probably have to keep. Because they're rare, because they're challenging to replace. What I have found is that in organizations, for example, on the issue of harassment, sexual harassment, there was a time when one of the reasons that organizations would tolerate was very much about, it was really about the fact that the individual in question was giving them the results that they wanted. And employers were willing to look the other way. As draconian as that was, it happened all the time. It still happens. But increasingly what I see is greater capacity to have difficult conversations with employees. and I'm delighted about that. I think that's marvelous, right? Because historically, you either show them the door for good reason or not, or you'd put up with stuff which was appropriate. I think we'll agree that most of us are running at a certain world of work is kind of cool. It's given us all kinds of great opportunity, but there's a backdrop there that's kind of special, that is true of today. I worked for an organization that was 400 people, and I was the first HR guy, and said to my management team, we need to have very clear policy, very clear expectations of everybody that works here around sexual harassment. They told me to go away. It took me 3 years. I'd talk about it all the time. I'd hit up against it. I did everything I could. And finally, I had an opportunity and I seized it. When I finally was able to convince the organization that we needed to do this, and we did it, and we forged ahead, I got laughed out of virtually every meeting that I held the presentation. And I'll tell you, this is a true story, and there's some humor to it, but there isn't, in my view. I remember meeting with our sales group, and I don't think they were any different than any other group. It's not because it was a sales group. It was male-dominated, and I spoke to them about the realities of the new policies and practices and the expectations, and helped them understand how their behaviors, what behaviors were appropriate and inappropriate. You know, the usual stuff that one would expect around that area. And then I asked for questions. And the question that I got from one of the folks at the back of the room was, will Blue Cross cover it? I never quite understood the question. I didn't know if that meant if, you know, the harasser, the harassee, it was an awful question. The room exploded, of course. I suggest to you that I was in a room not 2 months ago, making a presentation that wasn't a whole lot different from the one I did 20 years ago, around sexual harassment. And I do note that it was around sexual harassment, not harassment. I'll talk to you about that in a minute, too. And we've come a long way in some organizations. The climate was serious. The climate was responsible and absolutely appropriate. And it was still an 80-20 split of boys to girls. And yet there seemed to be a sensitivity around things that I think has really come a long way. So what I've seen is, you know, in a world where I spend a lot of time working with leaders, it's what I do for most of my day. We've come a long way in some workplaces. In some workplaces, I think it's been phenomenal. And when I'm working in small and medium-sized enterprise, I am absolutely aghast at how in some, and it's not to pick on small and medium-sized business, but it is a reality that they may not have the benefit of some of the training opportunities and some of the work that's been done in our institutional employers. So there's still some work to do. And I say we very differently than you can say we. I say we from the point of view that I get retained by these organizations to help them in terms of their human resource practices. And we're talking about organizational structure and their benefit program and their pay structure. And then I see this stuff happens in front of me. And as one very embarrassed manager said to me, man, I didn't think I paid you to give me that kind of grief. And I said, well, it comes with the package. If that's what you're going to show me, I'm going to speak up, and I'm going to speak very clearly about what's appropriate and inappropriate. So that's my exposure to that. You know about, and I just mentioned quickly, is this whole notion of impact versus intent. And it's something that often gets lost in these conversations around sexual harassment. The reality is, and boy, I sat in on a number of instances where the harasser said it wasn't my intention. And it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, right? It's about impact. So I trust you know this, that it is about that if the behavior is reasonably perceived offensive by you, that's good.